Arthur was 87. His life, measured in quiet routines and shared laughter, seemed unremarkable to outsiders.
He and Eleanor had built a sturdy, loving marriage spanning 4 decades, a masterpiece of domestic tranquility.
But Arthur harbored a secret, a deception so profound it had been the unspoken foundation of their entire union. For 43 years, he had been living 2 lives, the gentle Arthur and the man he was forced to bury. The weight of the lie, once bearable, now felt crushing, pressing down on his chest during every sleepless night.
He knew he was running out of time. The sand in the hourglass was nearly gone, and the truth demanded release.
The irony was cruel. His great love was built upon his greatest act of betrayal.
This was the morning. The coffee was brewing, the newspaper lay unfolded, and the moment had arrived.
He watched Eleanor preparing breakfast, her movements familiar, comforting, and agonizingly vulnerable. How do you shatter a reality you spent half a century painstakingly constructing? Where do the words even begin? The origin of the lie stretched back to a critical moment in 1980, long before they had met.
It was not a scandalous affair or a hidden fortune. It was something far more fundamental, his identity.
Arthur wasn't the man Eleanor thought he was. He was Elias, a man hunted, forced to disappear. Elias had been a brilliant, idealistic journalist caught in a complex geopolitical conflict.
He carried information that powerful forces desperately wanted silenced. He had to vanish completely.
The cost of staying Elias meant death for him, and potential harm for anyone who knew him.
He created Arthur, adopting a new past, cutting ties with everything that defined him.
He met Eleanor 3 years into his new life. She was the light he hadn't known he deserved. But every time she spoke of his childhood in Ohio or his time in the service, his heart ached. The entire history he shared with her was meticulously fabricated, a safety blanket woven from lies. He justified it daily. The lie protected her. The truth would endanger her, even decades later. But aging brought clarity. The threat was receding, replaced by the profound need for forgiveness. He wanted to face his final days not as Arthur, the coward, but as Elias, the honest man. He cleared his throat. Eleanor looked up, her face etched with concern. It began with 3 simple words. "Eleanor," he started, his voice a dry, thin rasp. "We need to talk about my past." She frowned slightly, stirring her tea. "Your past? You've told me everything, Arthur darling."
"No," he whispered, leaning forward. "I haven't. And I need you to listen without interruption."
He started with Elias. He explained the career, the dangerous documents, the threat of reprisal. He spoke of the decision to take the new identity, the legal papers, the forced severance of old ties. Eleanor sat frozen. The initial confusion curdled into disbelief, then cold, sharp anger. "Arthur is a ghost," he confessed. "A name I created to stay alive. My real name is Elias Varick." The room became silent, heavy. The sound of their shared history crumbling was deafening. She didn't shout, she didn't cry, she just stared at the stranger sitting opposite her. "The trips to Ohio? The stories about your sister?" she finally asked, her voice dangerously flat. "All borrowed, all manufactured to fit the narrative of the life I had to invent for us." The years of small, inconsistent lies suddenly made terrifying sense. The gaps he always skirted. Eleanor stood up abruptly, knocking her chair backward. It was the sound of the marriage breaking. 43 years, she repeated, her voice rising to a raw cry. 43 years of performance? Arthur felt the sudden, agonizing pain of regret. The relief of confession was immediately outweighed. He begged her to understand,
emphasizing that the love was real, only the foundation was false. "But how can the love be real," she challenged, "if the man I loved never existed?"
He showed her the documentation, old passports, the official change of name decree, the threats. He explained that he had finally spoken because the primary threats to Elias had neutralized over time.
Now the greatest danger was dying without ever honoring the woman he truly loved. Eleanor retreated, physically and emotionally. She went to the spare room, locking the door.
Arthur, Elias, sat alone, listening to the silence of a catastrophe.
The next 72 hours were the hardest of their lives, harder than any crisis they had faced together.
They communicated only through notes left on the refrigerator, clinical and devoid of emotion.
The core of the problem wasn't the past, but the present realization that he had hidden his true self. Eleanor grappled with the implications. Every memory was now viewed through a distorted lens. Did he truly love her, or was she just a necessary component in his elaborate disguise? She felt violated, not by physical betrayal, but by a continuous psychological masquerade. Arthur tried to appeal to her logic, explaining the necessity of his decision decades ago. But love rarely submits to logic. It demands honesty and transparency, especially in reflection. On the third day, Eleanor unlocked the door. She looked exhausted, but her eyes held determination.
"I don't know who you are," she stated simply, "but I know who we were."
She confessed her own small, past secrets, a flirtation, a minor financial indiscretion.
They were meaningless compared to his monumental lie, yet they served as a bridge.
She realized that Arthur was not a complete invention. He was Elias, constrained by fear. She decided to focus on the tangible proof of their life, the children, the home, the shared routines. "I married the man who brought me flowers every Tuesday," she told him. "Does Elias bring flowers?"
He nodded, his eyes wet. "Elias loves you more than Arthur ever could, because Elias is real."
The conversation shifted from accusation to painful, necessary rebuilding. She made him tell her everything he had suppressed: his true childhood, his family, his regrets. She demanded the full, unedited story of Elias, even the parts that Arthur had deemed inconvenient. They spent days mapping out his true history, filling in the enormous silent gaps.
It was difficult, agonizing labor. It forced Eleanor to mourn the Arthur she thought she knew.
But in that grief, she found Elias, a vulnerable man who had sacrificed his life for safety. The threat was real. The decision, though flawed in its execution, was made out of a desperate survival instinct. She had to choose: reject the history of betrayal or embrace the man beneath the facade. It was the love that tethered her, not the story, but the shared experience of 4 decades. She would have to redefine their marriage, accepting that Arthur had been a necessary protective costume. The path to forgiveness began when she asked him what he truly missed most about being Elias.
He answered instantly, his ability to speak freely about his work, his achievements, his failures.
Eleanor made a profound gesture. She took his old passport and placed it carefully on their bedside table. "We start calling you Elias now," she declared. "I need to learn my husband's name, finally." It was awkward at first. The children and grandchildren, confused, had to be introduced to Elias.
They were told the grandfather was reclaiming his true identity after a long, necessary silence.
The reaction was mostly supportive, though tinged with the sadness of 4 decades lost.
Eleanor began reading old articles Elias had written under his real byline.
She saw the intelligence, the passion, the fire that Arthur had always kept carefully banked.
In their final years, their conversations became richer, more complex, and terrifyingly honest.
Elias felt a profound lightness,
The weight of the world, carried for half a century, was finally lifted.
He discovered that telling the truth, even late, provided a level of intimacy previously impossible.
The greatest tragedy of the lie was not the deception itself, but the lost opportunity for true partnership.
Eleanor admitted her lingering pain. The betrayal remains a scar, a permanent reminder.
But she chose to accept the man, not the methods. She chose love over the expectation of perfection. Their story became a meditation on the nature of marriage, a continuous choice to forgive the past.
It raises the critical question: what level of deception is forgivable when motivated by protection? For the audience, the lesson is stark. Time does not diminish the gravity of an unspoken secret.
Every day the truth is withheld, the damage metastasizes, eroding trust from the inside out.
Arthur waited until 87 to find peace. The question remains, was the cost worth the wait? His decision secured safety, but sacrificed the authenticity of their most vibrant years together. We learn that true intimacy requires presenting your whole self, flawed history and all. Holding back essential truths means you are loved for a phantom, not for who you actually are. The resolution wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and finally, after 43 years, they were free. The story of Arthur and Eleanor, or rather Elias and Eleanor, serves as a powerful cautionary tale. We often believe that protecting loved ones means shielding them from inconvenient facts. But for relational health, shared truth always outweighs perceived protection. The effort expended in maintaining a complex lie is often greater than the consequences of revealing it. Elias found that Eleanor's capacity for acceptance was far greater than he had ever feared. His decision to confess, though motivated by his own need for peace, ultimately liberated her too. She was finally free from the nagging, unspoken inconsistencies that had haunted her subconscious. The late-life truth forced them into a deeper, more mature stage of love, built on raw authenticity. They were able to grieve the past, forgive the present, and face the future as their genuine selves. Elias Varick died 2 years later, his wife Eleanor by his side. In his final days, he was loved not for the man he invented, but for the man he finally became. The revelation provided a precious 2 years of unburdened honesty, a final gift to their union. Their legacy is a reminder that while the past cannot be changed, the foundation of the future can. If you are holding a secret that defines your relationship, ask yourself, why now? Is the delay serving love or merely serving the fear of consequence? The burden of the lie will always weigh more heavily on the keeper than the recipient. Arthur taught us that forgiveness is possible, even for monumental acts of concealment. But it requires acknowledging that the truth, no matter how painful, is owed to those we love. Don't wait until the final chapter to reveal the true contents of your own story. Face the consequence, embrace the risk, and build your life upon solid ground. This case study provides invaluable insights into the psychology of long-term relational deception. Remember, the hardest conversations often lead to the deepest connections. Disclaimer: this script is a dramatic interpretation of a common narrative theme in human relationships. Names, locations, and specific events are fictionalized for storytelling purposes and do not depict real persons or incidents.